When Hedera Hashgraph first came on the scene, it wasn't just another blockchain copycat. It introduced something that stood out from the crowd: a governing council made up of global corporations. Now, in the crypto world, where decentralization is practically a religion, this was a bold, even controversial choice. But Hedera's founders, Dr. Lehman Baird and Mance Harmon, believed it was the best way to build trust and stability in a space that was, at the time, full of uncertainty. Think about the landscape back then. Bitcoin was revolutionary but chaotic. Ethereum was powerful but plagued by scalability issues. And every new project seemed to be run by anonymous teams or small startups trying to convince the world they could handle billions of dollars in transactions. Hedera's team asked a different question. What if we put some of the world's most established companies in charge of governance? Not in charge of owning Hedera, but in charge of making decisions that could shape its future. That's how the Hedera Governing Council was born. The idea was simple. Instead of leaving governance to unknown developers or a few insiders, Hedera would recruit some of the most trusted names in business and technology. Each company would hold one vote. No one member could dominate the system, and the council would rotate over time to keep things balanced. In theory, this would ensure fairness, transparency, and legitimacy, the very things crypto critics said were missing from the space. At the beginning, people were skeptical. Some in the crypto community scoffed at the idea. They argued that bringing in corporations like Google, IBM, or Boeing went against the spirit of decentralization. But Hedera leaned into the argument. Their pitch was straightforward. If you want enterprises, governments, and institutions to actually adopt blockchain technology, they need a system they can trust. And nothing screams trust like Fortune 500 logos on your homepage. In a way, the council model was also Hedera's way of addressing a problem most blockchains ignored: governance capture. On many other networks, whales, big token holders, could sway decisions, or development teams could push changes without much oversight. Hedera wanted a structure that prevented any one group from having unchecked power. By spreading authority across global corporations with diverse industries and geographies, Hedera built something closer to a digital United Nations than a typical crypto project. The strategy worked in terms of visibility. When headlines broke that Google, IBM, LG, and Boeing were part of the council, it instantly gave Hedera legitimacy in the eyes of mainstream media and traditional investors. For a space that was still often written off as speculative or shady, that mattered a lot. So from day one, the governing council wasn't just a governance experiment. It was a branding statement. Hedera wasn't going to play by the same rules as everyone else. It wanted to prove that corporate trust and decentralized tech could coexist, and maybe even thrive together. When people talk about Hedera Hashgraph, one of the first things they bring up is the governing council. And for good reason, it's the crown jewel of Hedera's pitch. In a crypto world often full of overpromises, anonymous teams, and projects that vanish overnight, Hedera stood out by saying, "Look who's running this ship with us." Let's break down some of the heavy hitters that put their name and reputation behind Hedera, and why that matters. Google, the validation everyone noticed. When Google Cloud joined Hedera's governing council in 2020, it was a big deal. Not just because it was Google, but because it was Google publicly validating a blockchain project. At the time, tech giants were still cautious about attaching their names to crypto. Sure, Amazon Web Services hosted plenty of projects, but it didn't really put its brand behind any of them. Google took the leap with Hedera. What did they bring to the table? Two things: infrastructure and credibility. Google Cloud began running a Hedera network node, helping to secure the network while also showcasing Hedera as part of its cloud marketplace. For enterprise customers browsing Google Cloud's offerings, seeing Hedera right there alongside databases and AI tools meant blockchain didn't look so out there anymore. For Hedera, this was gold. You couldn't buy that kind of endorsement. Google wasn't shilling a token. It was showing up as a council member with an equal vote in governance. That helped push Hedera into conversations with enterprises that might never have looked twice otherwise. IBM, the old guard of enterprise tech. If Google brought modern validation, IBM brought legacy credibility. IBM has been around for over a century, and while it's not as flashy as Google, it carries massive weight in enterprise and government spaces. IBM has always positioned itself as a leader in blockchain services, especially through Hyperledger Fabric and its work with supply chains and finance. By joining the Hedera Governing Council, IBM essentially said, "We believe in what this network is doing, and we're willing to help guide it." For enterprises looking at distributed ledger technology, IBM's nod meant Hedera wasn't just another crypto experiment. It had the backing of a company that Fortune 500 CEOs already trusted. IBM also contributed its expertise in enterprise adoption strategies. They knew what corporations needed to see before they would adopt new technology: compliance, reliability, and governance. Their involvement helped shape Hedera's approach to attracting enterprise clients, something that remains part of the network's DNA in 2025. Boeing, a curveball that raised eyebrows. Now, here's one that surprised people: Boeing. When the aerospace giant joined the council, many were scratching their heads. What does an airplane manufacturer want with distributed ledger technology? But think about it, Boeing manages enormous global supply chains. From sourcing parts to tracking maintenance, logistics is a nightmare at that scale. That's where Hedera fits in. A fast, efficient, and tamper-proof network is perfect for things like supply chain tracking, maintenance records, and certification management. If you're building airplanes, you need to know with 100% certainty that every single part is authentic and properly documented. Hedera's technology could provide that level of trust and immutability. Boeing's presence on the council wasn't just symbolic. It signaled that Hedera's use cases weren't limited to fintech. They could extend into industries where reliability and security are life-or-death issues. LG, a global consumer electronics powerhouse. Another big name on the council was LG Electronics, the South Korean tech giant. For LG, blockchain wasn't just about buzzwords, it was about integrating digital infrastructure into consumer devices. There were even discussions about how Hedera could fit into the future of IoT, Internet of Things, where billions of devices need to communicate and transact securely. Think about it. Smart TVs, appliances, even cars, all of them generating data, all of them needing to interact in trusted ways. Hedera's low-cost, high-speed transactions fit perfectly into that kind of ecosystem. LG's role on the council highlighted Hedera's ambition to be more than just a financial blockchain. It could also become the invisible layer powering digital interactions in everyday devices. Standard Bank, opening the door to Africa. Hedera also brought in Standard Bank, one of Africa's largest financial institutions. This was a smart move because it showed Hedera wasn't just chasing North American or European corporations. Standard Bank gave Hedera a foothold in one of the fastest-growing financial regions in the world, Africa. For millions of people across the continent, traditional banking infrastructure is limited or unreliable. Distributed ledgers like Hedera can help leapfrog old systems, making cross-border payments, microloans, and remittances more efficient. Standard Bank's presence showed that Hedera wasn't ignoring these opportunities. Why these names matter? Now, let's step back for a second. Why does it matter that Google, IBM, Boeing, LG, and Standard Bank are part of the council? Simple: perception and influence. In crypto, perception drives adoption as much as technology does. If you're a startup or government agency considering blockchain, and you see a network backed by names you already trust, you're much more likely to take it seriously. These companies aren't perfect, but they've built reputations over decades, sometimes centuries. At the same time, their presence shapes the narrative around Hedera. Instead of being just another crypto project, Hedera became the enterprise-grade ledger trusted by global giants. That narrative continues to echo in 2025, even as new members rotate in and out of the council. The equal vote principle. One of the most important details about the council is that every member gets one vote. Google doesn't get extra weight because it's Google. Boeing doesn't get to dictate terms because of its size. That balance is what keeps the system from becoming a corporate oligarchy. It also reassures enterprises that joining the council doesn't mean playing second fiddle to a dominant player. This equal footing principle has kept the council stable and credible over the years. It's a reminder that Hedera's model isn't about handing power to corporations. It's about distributing it among trusted actors with diverse perspectives. So, when you hear people mention Hedera's council, remember it's not just a PR stunt. These companies brought legitimacy, expertise, and industry access that no other blockchain project at the time could match. Whether you're a fan of Hedera or a skeptic, there's no denying. The power players on its council have shaped the network's trajectory in profound ways. When you strip it down, Hedera's governing council isn't just about who's sitting in the seats. It's about what their presence signals to the outside world. In crypto, trust is hard to come by. After years of rug pulls, vaporware, and overhyped projects that never delivered, most enterprises and governments have been understandably cautious about diving into blockchain. And honestly, who could blame them? If you're a Fortune 500 company, the last thing you want is to tie your brand to some unstable network run by a handful of anonymous developers. This is where the governing council changes the game. Trust by association. Think of it like this: when Google, IBM, LG, Boeing, and Standard Bank put their names on Hedera's council, they weren't just adding logos to a website. They were lending trust. For enterprises, seeing those names signals that Hedera isn't a fly-by-night operation. If Boeing can trust it to explore supply chain tracking, and if Google is comfortable running a node, then surely it's worth at least a meeting in your boardroom. In other words, the council acts as a trust bridge. Enterprises that might not understand the nitty-gritty of distributed ledgers can look at the council roster and think, if these giants are involved, there must be something solid here. That kind of social proof is priceless. Enterprise adoption isn't easy. Here's the thing most crypto projects underestimate. Enterprises move slowly. They don't adopt new technology on a whim. There are compliance checks, integration costs, board approvals, regulatory concerns, and 1,000 other hurdles before anything gets greenlit. So, what Hedera did was remove one of the biggest barriers: perceived legitimacy. By putting global corporations at the center of governance, Hedera essentially told enterprises, you don't have to take our word for it. Take theirs. And this matters because blockchain adoption at the enterprise level isn't just about the technology. It's about confidence, reputation, and risk management. Having a governing council full of household names reduces the perceived risk of experimenting with Hedera. The signal to regulators. It's not just enterprises that pay attention, regulators do too. In 2025, compliance and regulation are some of the hottest topics in crypto. From stablecoin frameworks to anti-money laundering laws, every government wants to make sure blockchain networks don't spiral out of control. Hedera's council sends a subtle but powerful signal. This is a network that plays by the rules. When regulators see respected companies like Google, IBM, and Standard Bank participating in governance, it reassures them that Hedera is designed for stability and oversight. Unlike some decentralized projects that openly brag about avoiding regulation, Hedera leans into accountability. That makes it much easier for enterprises to pitch projects internally. Imagine you're an executive trying to get your company to experiment with blockchain. If you can say, by the way, Google and IBM are on the governing council, your case just got 10 times stronger. Industry diversity brings perspective. Another underrated strength of the council is the diversity of its members. You've got tech giants, Google, IBM, LG, finance players, Standard Bank, Nomura, manufacturers, Boeing, universities, and even law firms. Each member brings a unique perspective to the table. For example, a bank might care most about compliance and settlement speed, while a manufacturer might focus on supply chain tracking. A university might push for open-source innovation, while a law firm might emphasize regulatory clarity. This diversity ensures that Hedera's governance isn't skewed toward one narrow use case. Instead, it's shaped by real-world needs across multiple industries. And that's huge for adoption, because if you're a new enterprise exploring Hedera, chances are there's already a council member in your industry. That familiarity makes it easier to imagine how Hedera can solve your specific problems. A counter to too centralized. Of course, we can't ignore the elephant in the room. Critics often argue that Hedera's model is too centralized. After all, isn't crypto supposed to be about decentralization and community governance? Having big corporations in charge feels, to some, like a betrayal of those principles. But here's the thing. Hedera doesn't see itself as competing with Bitcoin's ethos of complete decentralization. It's carving out its own lane, one that prioritizes trust, reliability, and enterprise readiness. For enterprises that aren't ready to trust anonymous validators or token whales, Hedera's council is actually a selling point. And over time, Hedera has made it clear that the council isn't static. Members rotate, new organizations join, and the goal is to eventually expand governance further. It's not decentralization in the traditional sense, but it's also not a centralized dictatorship. Somewhere in between, a balance designed for real-world adoption. The ripple effect of trust. So what's been the actual impact? In practice, the council has helped Hedera land partnerships that smaller, lesser-known projects could only dream of. Whether it's in supply chain, payments, or tokenization, Hedera consistently shows up in enterprise conversations where trust is a non-negotiable factor. Take UNHCR's partnership with Hedera, for example, to distribute digital aid to refugees, or Shinhan Bank and Standard Bank testing international remittances on Hedera. These aren't just random experiments. They're projects that happen because the network already has credibility baked into its governance. Even in 2025, with new competitors popping up and new narratives emerging, the governing council remains Hedera's strongest differentiator. It's the answer to the question, why Hedera? And in many cases, it's the reason enterprises are willing to give HBAR a seat at the table. At the end of the day, Hedera's council model may not win over every crypto purist. But for enterprises, governments, and regulators, it provides something that's been in short supply in blockchain: confidence. And in a world where adoption depends as much on perception as it does on performance, that confidence is what keeps Hedera in the conversation. No matter how strong the Hedera Governing Council looks on paper, it hasn't escaped criticism. In fact, this governance model has been one of the most divisive topics in crypto discussions. On one side, you have people praising Hedera for bringing real-world legitimacy into blockchain. On the other, you have critics saying it's too centralized and out of touch with crypto's original vision. Let's unpack both sides. The centralization argument. The loudest critique is that Hedera's council feels like a walled garden. Unlike proof-of-stake blockchains where anyone with enough tokens can help validate the network, Hedera nodes are permissioned and run by council members. That means average community members don't get a direct say in governance. To many crypto purists, this defeats the whole point of decentralization. Why should big corporations like Google, IBM, and Standard Bank get to make the calls while everyday users are left out? Critics argue that this makes Hedera vulnerable to groupthink, slow decision-making, or even corporate agendas that don't align with the broader community. The transparency question. Another concern raised is transparency. While the council is public, critics point out that much of its internal decision-making isn't. There are no fully open governance forums like you see in DAOs, and some worry that key decisions about the network could happen behind closed doors. This has fueled the perception that Hedera is less community-first than other projects. The case for strength. But here's the flip side. The very thing that critics call centralization is exactly what makes Hedera appealing to enterprises. Large organizations don't want to bet on networks where anonymous whales or meme-driven voting can sway the future. They want predictable, professional governance. Hedera's model delivers that. By limiting governance to vetted, global companies across industries, Hedera reduces the risk of malicious actors hijacking the network. The council's diversity also means no single player can dominate. With fixed terms and rotating seats, Hedera ensures constant renewal and balance. It's not the radical decentralization of Bitcoin, but it's a system built for stability. The middle ground. So, is the council a strength or a weakness? The truth is, it's both, depending on who you ask. If you're a decentralization maximalist, Hedera might never appeal to you. But if you're an enterprise, regulator, or institution looking for a network that blends blockchain benefits with corporate accountability, the council is a major asset. What's clear is that Hedera chose a different path than most crypto projects. Instead of chasing grassroots adoption, it built governance to meet enterprise needs first. And in 2025, with regulation tightening and trust becoming the key currency, that decision might prove to be less of a weakness and more of a long-term strength. Hedera's governing council isn't just a feature of the network. It's the heart of its entire identity. Whether you see it as a bold innovation or a compromise, it's impossible to deny the impact it's had on Hedera's positioning in the blockchain world. Think about it. While many crypto projects struggle to win enterprise trust, Hedera walks into the room with Google, Boeing, DBS Bank, and Standard Bank already sitting at the table. That instantly gives regulators, investors, and developers a sense that this isn't just another experiment. It's a platform built with long-term credibility in mind. Of course, no system is perfect. The debate around centralization versus decentralization will never go away. But maybe Hedera doesn't need to play by the same rules as Bitcoin or Ethereum. Its council-driven model isn't trying to replace them. It's carving out its own lane where enterprise adoption, predictable governance, and regulatory alignment matter just as much as cryptographic purity. As we look toward the future, the real question is this: can Hedera's council model scale without losing its balance? Can it remain trustworthy while gradually opening up to broader community participation? If it can thread that needle, Hedera might not just be the enterprise blockchain. It could become one of the defining networks of Web3's institutional era. And here's the kicker: whether you love the council or hate it, the fact that we're even having this conversation means Hedera is relevant. That's more than you can say for a lot of projects out there. If you're as fascinated by Hedera's journey as I am, now's the time to stay plugged in. Subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and drop a comment with your take. Is Hedera's council the future of enterprise blockchain? Or is it a step backward for decentralization? Let's spark the debate. The next few years could tell us whether this governance model becomes a blueprint or a cautionary tale.